Once upon a time, in a small village far away, there was a young couple who deeply wanted to have a child. After many years of trying, the wife finally became pregnant, filling their hearts with joy. However, during her pregnancy, the wife began to have an uncontrollable desire for a plant called Rapunzel, which grew in a mysterious garden belonging to a powerful witch. Everyone knew that the garden was a forbidden place, surrounded by high walls, and that the witch did not forgive anyone who tried to steal her precious plants. The wife's desire became so strong that she began to fall ill, and her husband, fearing for her life, decided to risk everything. One night, with his heart racing and his hands shaking, he climbed the high garden wall and picked some Rapunzel leaves. But just as he was about to return home, the witch suddenly appeared, her sinister figure emerging from the shadows. With a piercing gaze, she confronted the man, who immediately fell to his knees, begging for mercy. He explained that his wife was very sick and that he just wanted to help her. The witch, although furious, proposed a deal. He could take the plants, but in exchange, when the baby was born, she would keep it. The man, devastated by the proposal, accepted the witch's deal. He returned home with the Rapunzel leaves and prepared soup for his wife. She improved quickly, but the weight of the agreement hung over the couple. When the child was born, a beautiful girl with hair as golden as the sun, the witch came to fulfill her part of the bargain. Without any mercy, she snatched the baby from her mother's arms, who screamed in despair and disappeared into the darkness of the night. The witch took the girl into her own home and raised her as her daughter, naming her Rapunzel. As Rapunzel grew, her beauty and kindness blossomed, and her golden hair grew long and shiny, something the witch watched with a mixture of pride and fear. She knew that soon other people would also notice Rapunzel's incomparable beauty, and this could pose a danger. To protect her from the outside world and ensure that no one would ever take her, the witch locked Rapunzel in a high tower in the middle of a dense forest. The tower had no doors or stairs, just a small window at the top, through which the witch climbed using Rapunzel's long golden braids. Rapunzel grew up in the tower, isolated from the world, without knowing anyone other than the witch. Every day, the witch visited her, calling, "Rapunzel! Rapunzel! Throw down your braids!" And Rapunzel, obediently, threw her long golden braids out the window so that the witch could climb up. As the years passed, Rapunzel became a young woman who was beautiful and full of life, but also lonely. She spent her days singing and dreaming about what existed beyond the small tower window. Her hair, now immensely long, was a wonder in itself, shining in the sun like threads of gold. Even though the witch told her that the outside world was dangerous and that the tower was the only safe place, Rapunzel couldn't help but imagine what life outside would be like. She dreamed of forests, cities, people, and adventures, but she never dared to disobey her mother. However, she didn't know that her life was about to change forever. An unexpected destiny was approaching the tower, and it would bring with it the promise of freedom and love. One day, as Rapunzel sang one of her sad melodies, her sweet voice echoed through the forest and caught the attention of a prince who was passing by. The prince was enchanted by the voice and followed the sound to the tower. When he arrived, he was intrigued to see that the tower had no doors or stairs. He stayed hidden among the trees and watched as the witch called Rapunzel and climbed up her long braids. The prince, curious, decided to try his luck. The next day, he returned to the tower and, imitating the witch, called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, throw down your braids." To his surprise, Rapunzel threw out her braids, believing she was the witch. The prince climbed the tower, and when he reached the top, he met Rapunzel for the first time. Rapunzel, surprised and scared, had never seen another human being other than the witch. She backed away, but the prince quickly calmed her, explaining that he had been attracted by her charming voice and that he had no intention of harming her. Over time, Rapunzel and the prince began to get to know each other better. He came to visit her every day, climbing the tower when the witch was away. Rapunzel was fascinated by the prince's stories about the outside world, the cities, the castles, the people, and the wonders she could only imagine. She, in turn, told the prince about her life in the tower, her loneliness, and her dreams of freedom. The prince, increasingly enchanted by Rapunzel, realized that he was in love with her, and Rapunzel also began to have feelings for the prince. They spent hours talking and dreaming of a future together. The prince finally suggested that Rapunzel run away with him. She agreed, but knew they would need a plan. So they decided that the prince would bring pieces of silk each time he visited, so that Rapunzel could weave a ladder and escape the tower. However, they knew that they would have to be very cautious, so as not to arouse the witch's distrust. The secret meetings between Rapunzel and the prince continued for months. With each visit, the prince brought more pieces of silk, and Rapunzel's ladder was almost ready. They were increasingly looking forward to the day they could finally run away together. But one day, during a conversation with the witch, Rapunzel unintentionally blurted out something that would condemn her. She innocently mentioned that her braid was heavier than usual. The witch immediately became suspicious and began to watch Rapunzel more closely. That night, when the prince arrived and called for Rapunzel, the witch saw him for the first time and was furious. Unbeknownst to him, she climbed up the braids first, and when the prince reached the top, he was met by the witch, who cursed him with her poisonous words. When the prince reached the top of the tower, he expected to see Rapunzel's sweet face, but instead he was greeted by the dark sight of the witch, with her piercing eyes and an expression of pure rage. "Did you think you could fool me, foolish prince?" she said, her voice thick with malice. The prince, surprised and alarmed, tried to explain himself, but the witch was overcome with a fury that he could not control. In a fit of rage, she cursed the prince, saying that he would never see Rapunzel again or find his way back to the tower. Then, with a sharp gesture, she cut off Rapunzel's long golden braids, which fell to the floor like strands of shining gold. The prince, desperate, tried to escape, but the witch pushed him through the tower window. He fell toward the ground, his clothes flapping in the air as he plummeted. When he finally touched the ground, he survived the fall, but his eyes were struck by thorns from the surrounding forest, blinding him instantly. In pain and despair, the prince wandered aimlessly through the forest, without vision, without Rapunzel, and without hope. While the prince wandered blind and desolate through the forest, Rapunzel faced her own dark fate. The witch, determined to completely isolate Rapunzel, took her to a distant, desolate region where there were no signs of life. There, she left Rapunzel to live in total isolation, far from any living soul. Rapunzel wept bitterly over the loss of the prince and her freedom. The days became long and lonely, and Rapunzel, even separated from her tower, felt more trapped than ever. But despite her sadness, she never stopped singing. Her melodious voice echoed across the desert, attracting curious birds and other animals, who gathered around her in search of solace. Over time, Rapunzel learned to live alone, cultivating her inner strength and hope. She took care of the animals that approached her and continued to dream that one day somehow she and the prince would be reunited. Years passed, and the prince continued to wander the forest, living in total darkness. He depended on his instinct to survive, eating fruits and roots and drinking water from streams he found along the way. In all these years, he never stopped thinking about Rapunzel. Her sweet voice still echoed in his memory, guiding him in his desperate search. One day, as he walked unsteadily and tiredly, he heard a distant melody. It was a familiar song, which he recognized immediately. Rapunzel's voice. The prince's heart leapt with hope, and he followed the sound, even without seeing, with new determination. His feet tripped over roots and rocks, but he didn't give up. The closer he got, the clearer the sound became, until finally, after years of separation and suffering, he arrived at the place where Rapunzel lived. Rapunzel, upon seeing him in such a state, rushed to him, her tears falling over her blind eyes. In an unexpected miracle, Rapunzel's tears cured her blindness, and the prince was able to see again. Now that the prince had regained his sight and found Rapunzel, they decided never to be apart again. The prince took Rapunzel back to his kingdom, where she was received with great joy and curiosity. Although she had lived so many years in isolation, Rapunzel quickly adapted to life in the castle. The king and queen, the prince's parents, were enchanted by Rapunzel and soon loved her as their own daughter. The kindness and courage she demonstrated during her long time of suffering caused the people of the kingdom to admire her deeply. The prince and Rapunzel were married in a grand ceremony, celebrated throughout the kingdom. The story of their love, overcoming all difficulties, became a legend told for generations. Together, Rapunzel and the prince ruled with justice and compassion and lived happily ever after, safe in the knowledge that true love can overcome any obstacle. Rapunzel teaches us that even in the most difficult situations, hope and true love can guide us to freedom and happiness. No matter how great the adversities seem, with courage and determination, we can overcome any obstacle. Always remember to be strong and never give up on your dreams, even when everything seems impossible. If you like this story, don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible adventures like this.